Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of March 26th of the Fort Collins City Council. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, the Lord's Prayer, and a moment of silence for our men and women serving overseas. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Brown Ackerman.
Excused.
Deborah Vega.
Excused.
Kathy Mount.
Present.
Mike Snyder.
Present.
Mark Hopler.
Present.
Randy Lipstraw.
Here.
Dakota Freitas.
Present. Thank you. Council, you have before you the corrected minutes from the February 12th meeting and the minutes from the February 26th meeting. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
So moved, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Could I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. Snell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Tonight we have a guest presentation from Mike from the Army Corps of Engineers, and this is about the wetlands restoration.
Just wanted to thank Madam President's invitation for me to come speak to you today. I'm here to speak about the project that we're doing that we received monies for, $250,000 to take a look to do a feasibility study to improve the wetlands of the portion of land that the city purchased with the help of the Trust for Public Lands back in 2009 in Waterworks Park. So essentially the part of the wetlands we're looking at is between the public beach and essentially the pond, stormwater pond that's there in Waterworks Park. So we came out and put together what's known as a scoping packet, and that essentially lays out the measures that we plan to take a look at over the next 6 months or so as we take a look at what is the best plan to improve that wetland for essentially the best price. So the way that the program that we're running under is called the Great Lakes Fisheries and Ecosystem Restoration Authority. What that allows the Corps of Engineers to go in and take a look at projects along the Great Lakes to be able to restore fishery and wildlife habitat along the Great Lakes. What that does is that the federal government will fund a project, if it's selected, to a 65% of the total project costs. The local sponsor will be responsible for 35% of the local project costs. That includes a lot of things like the value of the land is part of the total project cost, which, as you know, was purchased for a large sum of money. Other things could be included in the total project cost, such as work in kind, work that city employees or other NGO organizations can provide to basically match what we will do for the wetland. Currently, the scoping packet is in the public comment period. Anybody who wishes to comment on the scoping packet and the measures that are proposed in the scoping packet, they're welcome to send their written comments to the Corps of Engineers, either via email or via mail. The information of where to send that to is in the scoping packet. It's also located on the city's website if you want to go take a look at that and download that. Just kind of a brief introduction of the 6 measures we're looking at in terms of the wetland is one. Everyone who's been in that wetland knows that it's in pretty poor shape. It's been intensely modified by people over the past probably century. It also hasn't really gotten a lot of help from the low lake levels of lake. So there's a lot of invasive plants and invasive species that have taken over that wetland. And a lot of those invasive species, especially Phragmites, which are those tall reeds that everybody sees anywhere that grow like wildfire wherever they are. Right now that wetland has a very small portion of Phragmites compared to its total area, which is actually a good thing. It won't take much longer before those Phragmites take the whole thing over. And when that happens, essentially it chokes everything else out. So fish can't use it, birds can't use it. Essentially, there's no room for them to do anything because the Phragmites take over everything. So one of the major portions of the measure we're looking for is actually removing that and taking that out, and then establishing a program of maintenance and helping the city maintain that wetland so that the Phragmites don't get a hold of it again. So that's one of the proposed measures. Second measure is if you go kind of towards there's a point where the wetland ends. There's kind of like these uplands that go between the edge of the existing wetland down to the public beach. One of the things we're looking at is actually expanding out that wetland to be able to take some of those uplands and expand the area of the wetland to allow for more habitat. It is one of the very few of the existing natural wetlands that exists, so it's very prime to be able to add to that wetland quite a lot of prime habitat, especially for the Kirtland warbler. The Kirtland warbler is an endangered species. It summers in Michigan, in basically an area of about 50 or 60 square miles in the lower peninsula of Michigan, and then winters down in the Caribbean. And it has very little. There's very little places that are left along the lakeshore where it has the ability to rest once it crosses Lake Erie. Because what it needs is tall grasses with not a lot of moisture for it to be able to find a place to rest. And one of the things we got out of the comments from the Stoking packet is the Fish and Wildlife Service was very excited because apparently this wetland is a prime location for a rest location for the Kirtland warbler. So for the birding population, we can turn this into a prime habitat for a lot of grasses that they like. It could be a prime birding location and a great opportunity for economic development here in Port Pleasant. The third measure is to, instead of turning those upland areas into wetland, to basically keep them as uplands but plant them with more native vegetation and native grasses and allow them to remain a good habitat. Depending on what we find for the Kirtland warbler, that actually might be a better option to give them both a wetland habitat and an upland habitat for them to rest. So that's one of the other things we'll be looking at is taking that upland, instead of using it as mowed grass, to plant some other vegetation, native vegetation in there to serve as an upland native area for wildlife. The fourth option is to kind of channelize a little bit inside the existing wetland and create some vernal pools to allow some amphibians and fish species to be able to use that wetland. So in order to kind of promote a little bit more of a natural appearance that would have occurred before it's been modified. So that's the fourth option. The fifth option is to reconnect the wetland with Lake Erie. So basically build a hydraulic connection. Right now there's no hydraulic connection between the wetland and the lake. So there is some issue with runoff that gets into that wetland that's laden with all sorts of fertilizers and salt and everything else that deals with runoff and gets into that wetland. Without having a hydraulic connection to the lake, it impairs the ability of that wetland to function, especially in areas like now when the water level is extremely low. So, and then the sixth is to put some dunes along the wetland to protect it from incidents like Superstorm Sandy, which wiped out a lot of the natural wetlands that occurred along Lake Erie. It is natural to to do, but the purpose of barrier dunes and the reason why nature makes barrier dunes is to protect those wetlands and it's created naturally to be able to do that. So take a look at maybe putting in some natural dune barrier along the beach to be able to protect those wetlands from severe storm events. So we're looking at a project with a total budget of under $2 million. So that includes the value of the land, of course. So, and we'll be working on the feasibility study now until probably we'll come up with a feasibility study this fall, which will be put out again for more public comment about what we find is what we call the National Ecological Development Plan, which again provides the plan that provides the highest amount of ecological benefits at the best price. So that's what we intend to do over the next 6 months. We'll probably be out here essentially as soon as spring comes about, and the wetland renews itself, and as some plantings will come out and start our field work to be able to finish up that.
How do you get comments? Do you just have public meetings? Do you send that scope to the neighbors that
We have,
surround that? Or how is it?
We did send postcards out to about 150 interested parties, including the residents that live directly across from that wetland. That would be most impacted. To get comments to us, generally we don't have public meetings for a project of this size, because of our own resources. We can't get everywhere, unless there's some public controversy. Usually is one reason why we have a public meeting. We did send out again about 150 postcards, different environmental organizations, including the people who are directly in that area, inviting them to go to our link to be able to download this on their own. It's currently on the city website. That's one of the reasons why we're at the meeting, to basically spread the word, to try to get feedback and comments from the community. So.
Thank you. Am I kind of hearing you correctly that the 35% cost for the city is pretty much taken care of because of the value of the land?
Yeah, we'll have to do a formal appraisal, but that's what I'm counting on.
I imagine there's been a lot done by the Ottawa County Soil and Water Conservation District to mitigate the fragmite that's happened up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Will that be taken into consideration? And work they do from this point on?
I don't quite know the answer to
Okay.
that, but definitely something we would consider.
It could be a non-issue. And then in one of the points you were talking about, hydration flow, is that from the lake into or from the marsh out of?
Both.
Okay.
So essentially you're reestablishing a hydraulic connection between the lake and the wetland.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? Anybody from the audience have any questions of Mike? Well, you all know I'm very excited about this.
We're excited about it too.
Yes.
We're very fortunate to be able to get funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which was previously funded over 5 years to provide funding for projects that improve the ecological condition of the Great Lakes. The president has proposed extending an additional 5 years. So we're currently in year 3 of the first 5 years, and then the president has proposed extending an additional 5 because it's been such a success. So very, very fortunate that we were able to get those funds. So.
And we've been in touch with the Trust for Public Land. We've been in touch with the Black Swamp, so we're moving in the right circles. Mr. Hanson.
Jim Hanson, 307 11th Street. All this work that you're doing, will that impact any of the festivals or any kind of activities like that that's possibly going to be in the Waterworks Park area?
My assumption is most of those festivals are during the summer. One of the things that the Fish and Wildlife Service is the Kirtland warblers kind of migratory time is from, I believe, May to the middle of June, and then like the middle of August until the end of September. So it really doesn't leave a lot of construction time in the summer. So for this project, the construction time will probably be more in the spring.
No, I mean like the 4th of July festival or the fireworks and that kind of thing.
You know, unless those types of activities are in the wetland.
Jim, all the work is from the wetlands to the east.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Yankee?
What will the restoration site look like once it starts, you guys start coming in there and working on it? You're going to bring in bulldozers and shovels and things like that? Or
Yeah, there probably will be heavy equipment, especially to get rid of the Phragmites. Phragmites typically have very deep rhizomes. They go very deep, so it takes a lot of excavation to be able to get that material out. They are very persistent. It takes a lot of work to get rid of them. You know, the goal is to try to get the wetland in a good enough condition that it can support native vegetation again. And to do that will require some excavation out of non-native vegetation.
well, you'll be spraying also for the Phragmite and the other vegetation along the shoreline?
There are different types of methods for Phragmites removal, from mechanical to spraying, and actually that's one of the major research projects that the Corps and the EP are doing, is trying to find what's the best way to get rid of these things, because it's short of digging them out, it's a pretty hard slog. It takes a lot of persistence to do it, and you know, the problem is that spraying it takes care of the top, but it doesn't take care of the rhizomes beneath. So you know, you can spray it. What you do is you have brown Phragmites for a year, and next spring they just pop back up again. So you know, that's one of the challenges that we have, is to try to find, short of mechanical removal, ways to try to remove Phragmites.
Anything else for Mike?
So the time frame is the